Well, good afternoon, everybody. If we judge by popularity for the number of people attending, I think I will go for irrigation. It seemed to be, but it wasn't after lunch, just to be fair. But water, I think water is just as interesting as all the topics that have been spoken so far. And I think I have two colleagues of mine who will be also giving presentations. I'd like to introduce them first to you. Engineer Maysoon Al-Zoubi, Her Excellency Engineer Maysoon Al-Zoubi is the Secretary General of the Higher Population Council, but has been in the water business for quite some time. She has been already the Secretary General of the Ministry of Water and Irrigation for 3 years. Nevertheless, has an extensive career in water and has taken positions at the Royal Court as Senior Policy Analyst, and before that as Infrastructure Specialist at the Prime Ministry. She's a board member of several organizations, technical and social, but has shown political knowledge in diplomacy in the region, in our region especially, and all over the world as well, on the international scale. She will be speaking about diplomacy, water diplomacy. I also have with me Patrick Bachelery, who is the general manager of the company operating one of the biggest plants, wastewater treatment plants in the world, but to the latest standards of quality. He's been 25 years in the water and wastewater technology experience, but specializing in the last 14 years in operations of treated wastewater and sludge reuse. He will talk to us about the company and the plant that he is operating. Patrick has a Master of Science in Hydraulics from École Nationale Supérieure de Hydraulique et de Mécanique, so you don't think that he is only a technician. He is actually a scientist as well, like the rest of most of us. Yeah. Anyway, I'll start. My name is Koussai, and I also have been Secretary General of the Ministry of Water and Irrigation in Jordan, Ministry of the Water Authority in Jordan as well. That's quite some years back, 1993 to 1999. I also have been the head of Desalination Research Center for 10 years in Oman, which you probably are aware of, where the scientists also met. Today, I will be talking about the Jordan water sector, because I think the most important thing is for you to know the details of the water sector. And the water sector is a complicated entity in Jordan. It has had its share of ups and downs. But why are we here today? We're here to share knowledge about Jordan's water, food, and energy sectors. That's what we're here for the last few days. And to remember that science can solve problems, and to confirm that information sharing, proper utilization of science and dialogue are the best practice, and they can bring peace. We have a group of experts here and scientists with broad international experiences, and are here to become acquainted with the situation in Jordan, and we hope impartially and without bias, and we hope that we can give you the picture as it stands. So this represents an opportunity to pass our message across the world that water in Jordan is a complicated issue. And at the end, we may decide that water in Jordan is not a science, it's an art. Because I don't know what a juggler in a circus is. Is he an artist or is he a scientist? But he does a lot of juggling, and we in the water business do a lot of juggling. There are characteristics to the history of water in Jordan. First of all, there are the growth of cities and the changing needs. As a result, we have plenty of water transport schemes, and we have continuous population imbalance, both caused by internal demographic changes and demographic changes in the region. As a result, the quantity and the quality issues, because we're taking too much water from where it came up, we're drying up the streams, and we end up having to treat the waste, because then it will be the base flow of the wadis if we don't do that. Let me just a little bit give you an idea about our transport schemes. If you look at the map, here's our capital, Amman. where between Amman and Zarqa there is more than half of the population of the country. To start out with, Amman was happily living with its own means in water, few springs that were located now downtown of Amman. It wasn't long before it needed more water. The first target was a little bit south, where they started digging groundwater wells and pumping the water to Jordan, to Amman. Not long after that, looked a little bit west, where there were springs feeding a town nearby, and they took the springs. And when I say we or they, I mean the water people. Okay. When the news is good, I say we. When the news is bad, I say they. Yeah. So looking west, they took the water from a village, Wadi Sir, which had continuous running water for 12 months a year, and moved it over to Amman. It wasn't long after that, that started looking east. So there was the Azraq Oasis, which had fairly good quantities of groundwater, and it was pumped from Azraq to Amman. Well, that wasn't so happy an occasion, because along with the people living in Azraq, both the government and the people ended up over-abstracting the aquifers there, and there was a salinity barrier between the fresh water and most of the groundwater wells became saline. Still, that wasn't enough. So next came water from the Jordan Valley, coming from the canal, coming from the Jordan River upstream. And also pumping capacity 45 million cubic meters to Amman from the valley. And that's one. Then I think we targeted the valley again later on for some more. One of them is desalinated water from desalinated mineral water. And we also used the water coming from the north. In 2012, we bought water from Israel even. So that's then the big scheme, until the big scheme came. The big scheme came with 100 million cubic meters coming from a fossil water from the south all the way up to Amman as well. And again, planning for the future, there is the project here that's going to take water from the Red Sea to the Dead Sea, desalinating on the way, and also sending some water to Amman. So Amman has been always thirsty. Amman never had really continuous flow of water within its systems. And why is that? Can you be such a bad planner? The reason is because until recently, which is what's happening now, is really beyond any expectations. Refugees and host communities issues and water sharing, they have always been part of our life, part of the norm associated with the kingdom's development, if you want to call it development, or as an impediment to development. We start with the establishment of Israel in 1948. An influx of refugees came to the east bank of the river. The Arab-Israeli War, 1967, brought more refugees into this part. The Lebanese Civil War, 1975 onwards till 1990, I think, brought Lebanese, but also brought Syrians with them, because there were Syrians working in Lebanon that also moved in here. Then the Kuwait invasion, 1990, which put all our systems to test, put our resilience in dealing with the water to test, when we had 200,000 Jordanians come in from Kuwait within 2 months. And strangely enough, we managed to live with that. Then there's the Iraq War in 2003, which brought in more refugees. And the Syrian Civil War started 2011. It has brought and still bringing more refugees. So we have 9 million people. 6 million are Jordanians, 3 million are not Jordanians, half of the 3 million are Syrians. This is my simple numbers for the formula. So what does the water sector do? How does the water sector handle those things? When we were told, why don't you do your forecasts taken migration into account in the future when you do your future supply and demand scenarios. See, how can you do that? But when you look around you, I think the next scenario that you can think of will not bring people of different nationalities, or different nationalities may bring more people of our own people. This is the scary part of the whole thing. Anyway, so that's why what has put the stress on the water. So if you look at the domestic water, there has been an incremental supply, as I showed you earlier, bringing it from here and there through the years. But all the supply has always been short of actual needs, because when we visualize the need, by the time the project is implemented and executed and the water comes here, then it comes in late. So the population growth accompanied by urban concentration. Urban concentration is really a big story in Amman. But it made capital investment within the utilities became cheaper to deal with it than going through sprawling communities. So to manage the issue, the Water Authority of Jordan was established in 1988, entrusted with the provision of water and wastewater services and the management of the water resources. To be able to manage through the years, successive loans were being taken to make water accessible, to make it accessible to as many of the people of the country as possible. So by 1993, which was 5 years after the establishment of the Water Authority, 97% of the population had access to piped water, which is remarkable. Mind you, the pipe is not full all the time, but it's there at least. So water pipes were extended to cope with the growth. So every time there's a new community comes somewhere, so you extend, give it more water pipes, more 4-inch, more 2-inch pipes. But the networks were not structured to match this horizontal sprawl, nor the vertical, because we have difficult terrain in Amman itself with hills. Well, since expansion was given priority because you have to give water to people, maintenance was neglected, of course, because the money is always limited and the systems needed always repairs, and at the end affecting the poor quality, the quality of the service, all at the expense of increasing debts for the Water Authority. So as a utility, it's something like, now it's $1 billion in debt. In 1993, it was 370. In 1994, we erased all the debts, 370 million. But now, again, it's over 1 billion. Now, as far as agriculture is concerned, this is another story. It's another use of water. In the 40s, it was rain-fed agriculture that the country was living off. At least 50% based on rain-fed agriculture and 50% on import for food. Irrigated production increasingly replaced rain-fed agriculture slowly. So roughly you need 1,500 square meters of irrigated land per person living in the country, which we don't have. And this area in turn needs 1,400 cubic meters of water, of which a continuously declining fraction was available. Only a small fraction of all this was available. So the food trade deficit kept expanding and is still expanding. In agriculture, we have two major areas for irrigated agriculture, one each with a completely set of different conditions, the Jordan Valley and the irrigated highlands. To move water around between sectors is always difficult if you don't have a conveyance system. So the conveyance systems, which are always expensive, also requiring major investment, were an obstacle to actually have the opportunity to divide your water. Another obstacle was the absence of a regular system for shifting water allocation among uses until recently. Right now, it's actually very well calculated. Wastewater is our third component there. The decade between 1980 and 1990 was the major shift in this direction. In those years, we managed to increase the wastewater services provided with piped networks to 75% of the urban population and 52% of the rural population. Maintaining these percentages has always been a challenge and still is a challenge. So you need reform. to be able to live with all those conditions, you need reform. And I'll go through a few slides of showing you the efforts that they were done, they were made in order to cope with this situation. So the reform established was started in 1993 when thinking that setting up a Ministry of Water and Irrigation would actually it would separate policy from operations, which is important if you want to function properly. You can't let your operations, your day-to-day operations dictate your policies. So facing networks that are broken down, rigid centralized organizations and inefficient organizations, operations as well, reform started with a very concentrated effort, and surprisingly, it met little resistance. So I'll give you a lot of actions and responsive actions to what, which is the next 7 slides will be like this. So operation and management activities included leak detection, well operation, GIS, customer base, etc. Those were introduced. This would lead to operational efficiency and improved utility performance. That was the idea. Samra expansion, the treatment plant expansion, sewage network extension, in addition to several other wastewater treatment plants were also constructed. So this leads to environmental improvement and had the opportunity for private sector participation. The DC project from the south on BOT basis was completed and finalized. So that falls under the title of resource augmentation or supply augmentation. Doubled the conveyance system that I told you about between the Jordan Valley and the highland, which took from the canal basically 45 million cubic meters. It was doubled to 90 million cubic meters. Mind you, it was never used because we had never enough water to take 90 million cubic meters, but at least 80 was reached. Then we continued to build series of treatment plants for several sources which had become polluted, also to take advantage of the water of every drop of water that's available. So that also led to environmental beneficiation and increase in the supply. We went through the process of awarding the Amman management contract and corporatization of the utilities. This led to utility management, private sector participation, and stakeholders dialogue. This led to all of this. In order to be able to get the private sector involved, also we had to prime for its participation by preparing the books and other information to facilitate due diligence. So this has led to proper asset management and private sector intervention. We corporatized the Aqaba water, so we had to do institutional restructuring to do that. We led a broad campaign of human resource assessment and management, which led to human resource development. That was back in the late 90s. Today, with the Secretary General of the Ministry of the Water Authority leaving, I counted 5 people that are close to 60 that are still in the ministry or the Water Authority or the water sector, and there is a gap of 20 years to the next set. Did you realize that? A gap of 20, the next set is in the 40s. So we also restructured the water tariff. The efforts, that was an effort towards cost recovery. We worked with donors and multilateral agencies in the assessment of the water sector continuously. That led to data validation and good data gathering. We prepared water strategy and policies. This charted the sector course and took the whole issue into a national perspective. Formulated a comprehensive investment plan which defined the needs and priorities. We enhanced the role of a unit which is called the Project Management Unit to oversee the water sector investment plan. So this led to coordination mechanism among donors and also to other ministries. Plenty of work was done on groundwater protection, on efforts for groundwater protection by looking at the basins as a whole, metering them, curbing licensing new wells, forming the Highland Water Forum Association, and so on. This has led to environment and resource protection. We reactivated the Water Master Plan, which was done way back in the early 90s. That also increased our knowledge base of the situation. Other measures included selection, calibration, and repair of domestic and industrial consumer meters for increased accuracy at low flow. Low flow is very important. And accuracy of water meters at low flow is very important in Jordan. And we're also moving now towards smart meters. This is all to increase revenue. Samra, as we said, went into operations with significant positive impact on the environment. Samra takes care of the wastewater of Amman and Zarqa, which is more than half the population of the country. One plant. You will hear more about it. Ma'in springs, which flow into the Dead Sea, right up here. They also went into operation. They needed desalination, setting up of a desalination facility. And the challenge was to maintain operational efficiency because it was one of those forms of PSPs where you build, construct, and operate for a few years and then hand over. Not a 20-year business, it's a 7-year or 5-year business. And it was managed, it was handled properly. The rehabilitation of networks were completed in most of the cities and towns. But another phase of replacing the tertiary and house connections that still remains pending in most cities as well. This has led to understanding of what hydraulic zoning is, and which was achieved in Amman at least, and became a way of modus operandi. Negotiations and legal disputes with well owners in the highland and the DC area were finalized as well, because those had monopolies over the DC water for many years. And we had to wait 25 years from the day that those licenses were given to drill wells in order to renew them. And then the question of water rights came up, and there were legal disputes on the issue, but this was resolved. Public water is public water. And a new national water strategy was established, associated also with an action plan. They were formulated, therefore charting the future. But again, with all of this, there are key issues that remain key issues. Crisis management always diverts attention from the longer-term problems. And unfortunately for the sector, it has seen, since its start, it has seen always crisis after crisis after crisis. Energy played a role because we were moving water from here to there, we were lifting water from down to up, and so on. Energy is playing a very, very significant role in the operation. And also because you have water coming from the valley up to Amman, and people near the valley are being charged the same as the ones in Amman, wasn't the right way to do things, because Amman is having cheap water, expensive water, and more very expensive water is still coming on the way. But other perpetual issues that remain within the water sector, once you're aware of the water sector, is the first one is the non-revenue water. Non-revenue water is an indicator, one of the indicators of the performance of a utility. And if you say, I want to set up performance indicators for utilities, I personally would go for this one over any other one, because it includes probably another 10 indicators within it. To be able to achieve low non-revenue water, you have to do many good things in the utilities. We'll look at supply to equal demand to equal resources. This is an impossible task. I think we've given up on this issue. Project prioritization is a very important thing, because donors come left and right, banks come left and right, and we have to decide what the priorities for projects are. Sometimes that has shifted. It used to be that the donors actually tell us what the next project in line is, but now we've got control over this because we know what we're doing. We're still targeting cost recovery. We have competing needs between domestic and agriculture, and we have problems still with groundwater governance. We don't really have a comprehensive national water law, though we have organization-specific laws. We have a law for the Water Authority, law for the Jordan Valley Authority, a bylaw for the Ministry of Water and Irrigation, and so on and so forth, but we don't have a comprehensive water law. And public awareness remains the issue, because there is a division between the public and the private anyway, in all sectors, not to mention a social sector like water, that try to build confidence and so on and so forth. I hope with this I gave you a good idea that is it an art or a science? Anyway, so I want to thank you for listening and being patient. And if anything else is said about the water sector in the future, now you know where we come from. Shall we go ahead? Yeah, please. We'll have the questions afterwards.
I remember that at last conference there was talk of bringing water from aquifer at the southern border with Saudi Arabia with a very large pipe going to Amman. Has this been completed? The piping of water from Saudi Arabia aquifer to Amman with the very large pipe.
Yes. It's already constructed.
It's constructed. Okay.
Yeah, it's already supplied.
Okay.
And commissioned. And we have an issue there, incidentally, which is being brought. It was intended to provide water with 100 million cubic meters.
Yes.
So it's an operation. It can give Amman 100 cubic meters million. But there is a question of radiation in it, which has not met Jordanian standards. And I think my personal look into this, that we set up the standards too rigid before ever expecting there's going to be radiation in our water. So the water authority and the water sector cannot get out of this issue. So we end up using this 100 million cubic meters, mixing it with fresher water from the groundwater wells in order to reduce the...
Where does this radiation come from? Are there radioactive materials or what?
The radiation is from phosphate.
Phosphate.
I will, Koussai, he covered most of what they're doing at a national level. I will talk today about something that, unfortunately, it is not tackled well in the Ministry of Water. Although we are in the Ministry of Water in Jordan, we are in the downstream. So this is the thing, it's very important to us, but still it's not priority in the Ministry of Water. I'll talk about regional water cooperation and peace building. Here is the map of Jordan, but here I will talk, thanks God, Jordan is in the focus of Arab countries. It is a state of stability and provides secure basis for economic and human activities among the very hot region around us. From here, you will see we are surrounded by countries, and if I don't have the map of the water resources, but 40% of our resources is shared. And from the northern part and the southern part, we are in the upstream. I'll talk a little bit about water in Jordan, but from the ministry perspective, it is not from operation and maintenance and the business. The demand in Jordan outstrips freshwater availability by sizable quantity. Current demand exceed freshwater supply by more than 1,000 MCM. This is before the refugees. Now I think it's more than this. I heard the Minister of Water and Irrigation says, what we have is enough for 3 million people, and now we are feeding 9.55. This is the exact number of the Jordan with non-Jordanian as well in 2015. And I would expect now we will reach 11 million very soon because of a very high fertility rate with the Syrians, and they increased the growth rate. It used to be like 4, now it is 5.3 because of the Syrians. In order to face this, like what he says, Challenge Kingdom is actively pursuing innovative solutions such as wastewater retreatment plant. We reuse up to 90%, maybe more, of our retreated water. We reuse it in agriculture, providing this will substitute the fresh water. It won't be given to agriculture free of charge. So we will give them this water and we'll take instead fresh water for drinking and other purposes. Also, we desalinate brackish water, tapping in new water, and this is what you said, this is the DC aquifer. Of course, a very effective demand management. When you see the demand, when we calculate the demand, it's very demanded, very well managed. And also we have enhancement, of course, of water supply, and I said is the reduction of non-revenue water. Now with the regional water, Jordan is also embarking among efforts to foster better relation with Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Syria, with which it shares common water sources. Of course, optimized cooperation with these countries will ensure for just water allocations and also encourage more information exchanges so that neighboring countries can learn from each other best practices. Now with this page, I will talk about refugees and their impact on Jordan. Of course, like Koussai said, Jordan has welcomed hundreds of thousands of refugees since it gained independence in 1946. Even before that, even before 1921, we received from Russia and from Armenia. This is also a very old wave of refugees, and still have them here. Of course, with the majority of them successfully integrating into country's vibrant, peaceful society. The latest and the largest rise in Jordan's population, it is not normal population. It is resulting from the Syrian crisis beginning in 2011. The percentage is between 6 and 7 if we count only the refugees, 7%, but all Syrians, it's up to 14%. So the Jordanian now, it's 9.55. The non-Jordanian are 2.88. 50% of the 2.88 are Syrians. So those has inevitably increased pressures on public services and also strained water and energy resources. Fuel, power, and water use have risen sharply since 2011, as have also the subsidy bills for the government, because those sectors are subsidized by the government. Of course, simultaneously, the public facilities are costing more because you have to invest more in building new schools, hospitals. They use the equipment. Most of them depreciated before its age, so it costs a lot. About the transboundary water management here in Jordan, shared quantities and allocation regimes are stipulated in agreements between Jordan and Israel and between Jordan and Syria. These quantities are not realized for various reasons. Moreover, since these agreements were put in place, there have been significant advances in technology and changes in water and energy availability. However, efforts in the region show that water management can also provide potential for enhanced cooperation. It is important to not only focus bilateral negotiations on water sharing rights, but to shift cooperation to general policy making related to common interests and needs in water resources management. Water diplomacy. What we mean with water diplomacy, it includes all measures by state or non-state actors that can be undertaken to prevent or peacefully resolve conflicts and facilitate cooperation related to water availability, allocation or use within states and public and private stakeholders. However, theoretical foundation to cooperation over shared resources and best approaches to implement water diplomacy in practice are still weakly developed. Concepts and approaches, such as multi-level water governance, adaptive water governance, mutual gain approach, and instruments for benefit sharing need to be further developed and operationalized. What are the challenges to regional cooperation in water? Shared water resources are used in different countries with no coordination, with all parties or riparians sharing the resources. Decision taken in joint meeting never come to ground after consultation with central governments. The absence of comprehensive peace agreement among the riparian countries. Countries upstreams control the amount of water flowing to the downstream users, and countries in disregard of their needs. Lack of trust and will to cooperate among riparian countries. The role of parliamentarians and NGOs is not as efficient as it should be when it comes to water issues agreements between countries. The role of scientists, scientific research centers, and academia is not efficient and in many cases excluded from the contribution. Why the cooperation is not working? Of course, absence of comprehensive peace, the unfair control of upstream users regardless of what downstream user needs, water scarcity, inefficient donor and international role, lack of accurate information sharing on water-related issues among different countries. Conclusions and recommendations to resolve water conflicts or any conflicts, negotiation, mediation, and conciliation are needed. To be successful, though, such a process must be rooted in an in-depth contextual understanding. Third-party and multi-track diplomacy is critical to maintaining dialogue under uncertain political conditions, particularly when formal negotiations between conflicting parties have come to a halt. It is important to show that peaceful diplomatic solution to vital contested issues is still possible. In the long term, the solution is cooperation and integrated and coordinated sustainable management of the shared water resource. Importance of partnership between government, private sector, civil society in order to mobilize the silent majority and enable them to become shareholder of their future. There is an urgent need for developed countries to provide technical assistance and support to water-poor countries to reach better level of water safety. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. We'll start first with a short movie on the Samra Project. So I'm happy to share with you this presentation about an ambitious project which started 14 years ago. Maybe you have heard about Samra. Koussai mentioned it sometimes, in this presentation. Maybe it's well known as a major asset in Jordan for treating wastewater and a big part of wastewater in the country. And also it's, I believe, quite known as being a plant which contributes to environment, protection of environment, since all the water treated at high international standards are used for irrigation. 100% of the water is used for irrigation. But this time, the presentation will focus more on a different angle, which will be energy production, because this plant can also produce energy and can provide 80% of the energy it needs for operation. So, sorry. So a few figures first, about to have an idea of the size of the plant. So it treats 70% of the total wastewater collected in a country, in one area. So as I mentioned earlier, all the water is used for irrigation. In fact, the water goes to King Talal Dam and after irrigates the Jordan Valley. So in terms of if we add also all water consumption, including drinking water and irrigation, capacity of the plant represents 10% of this global water consumption. In terms of energy, so this is not that common, even in the world, to have a plant which is able to produce, to buy finally only 20% of the energy it needs for operating. The rest being produced by renewable resources. It will be detailed later on with hydraulic energy and also biogas energy. Another point also, which is a good contribution for environment, and this is for the future. Now, we don't use sludge that the plant produces. Maybe in short, I don't know if you know about the way it works, wastewater treatment plant, but the pollution, to make it simple, the pollution which comes from the wastewater is taken out from the water thanks to water line process and sludge line process, and this pollution is converted into sludge. After this sludge is dried, and for the moment we store it, but because this sludge has a good quality, no pollution from industries, for example, it can be used later on as probably a fertilizer or soil conditioner. So for me, we can consider it's kind of gold in the future. But now the regulation in Jordan is not ready to use this resource. So a description of the project itself, I would say on a more contractual point of view. So it was the first public-private partnership in Jordan in 2003. So it's on the scheme of BOT, means the contractor designs the plant, constructs, operates during 20 years, and after transfer the plant to the government of Jordan. So the contractor is in fact a consortium of two companies, international companies, Suez, which is a French group, and CCC, which is more a regional group, specialized in construction. So this project was made possible thanks to American organizations like USAID and MCC. They brought, in fact, 50% for each phase of the total cost. Phase one, this is the start of the project. The cost was about $200 million US. The extension, what we call phase two, is more or less the same cost. So it's a long-term contract until 2037. This is a principle of usually of a BOT scheme. So after 3 years of construction, operation started in 2008, and because of the growth of population, as it was mentioned earlier, mainly due to flux of refugees. So only a few years after the start of the phase 1, the government started to realize that they needed to expand quickly the plant, not for phase 1 to be overloaded. And so negotiations started, and expansion was signed in 2012. And finally, after 3 years of construction, operation started in October 2015. So the capacity of the plant is, as you can see, 364, nearly 365,000 cubic meters per day, which represent more or less 3 million of inhabitants. I will go a little bit more, sorry for those who are not very technical, a little bit more on details about technical, I would say, information. First about electricity production, after I will mention something about consumption. So this is, we have 2 ways, in fact, to produce electricity in Samra. Both are renewable energies. First point, and this is due to the specific configuration of the plant. There is a difference of elevation of 100 meters between Amman and Samra. By the way, Samra is, I don't know if you remember the map, it's about 1 hour from Amman, northeast, next to Zalka, which is the second biggest city in Jordan. So because of this configuration and this energy available, we can produce electricity with turbines, 2 turbines at the entrance of the plant. And because also there is a difference of elevation between inlet and outlet, 40 meters, we can also produce some electricity with turbines at the outlet of the plant. So we have 3 turbines. Francis, for those who know a little bit, Pelton turbines at the entrance, and Francis turbines at the outlet. So it was at that time also a premiere in a way that, in the world, I mean, because it was the first time inlet turbines were used on raw water. Usually it's quite, I would say, common to use on clear water or different kind of waters, but not on low water from wastewater. So this means that we needed to, it was a challenge to have a special coating of the turbine, and to have also a pretreatment upstream the turbines to avoid any clogging and any damage on the turbines. So this electricity with hydraulic turbines represent 25% of what we produce in the plant. The remaining 75% comes from biogas. So to go back to the process of wastewater treatment plant, when I mentioned before that we produce sludge, this sludge after is dewatered and also digested with a specific facility, and this enables to reduce the volume and to reduce organic matters. And at the same time, we release, in fact, biogas, which is methane, and this methane is cleaned and after can be used to produce energy thanks to some generators. We have 10 generators, the brand Caterpillar, at site. So globally, per year, we produce 75 gigawatt hour of energy. So in terms of consumption, a few words. So we have two lines, water line and surge line. I would say water line is quite classical for those who know about wastewater treatment plant. I will not go too much in detail, but the last, for example, the last stage enables to disinfect, not totally, but sufficiently enough to irrigate after, to send the water for irrigation, is chlorination. And here, as you can see in the surge line process, we have what I mentioned earlier, anaerobic digestion. This enables to produce biogas. So finally, total consumption of the plant is 90 gigawatt hour. We are able to produce 75. So if you make quick calculation, it means that we are able to cover 80% of our need in energy. So thanks to this, in fact, we don't buy, we reduce, I would say, the cost of energy bought from the national grid. And this is quite, in addition to the environmental benefit of this project, which is to take less electricity from the network. As you know, in Jordan, or you maybe know, most of the electricity is thermal electricity, I mean, from thermal centrals. So it means there is emissions of CO2. So if we reduce I would say, we produce more and we buy less, we reduce CO2 emissions. Second point, on the financial point of view, this enables also to reduce drastically the cost of electricity of the plant, and this is usually the second topic, highest consumption, I mean in terms of expenses, highest amount of expenses in the plant. So and this makes the tariff low and affordable for the country and sustainable. This is also a very important point for such a kind of project. So for sure, not everything is simple. We have to take into consideration some constraints. When we started the project 14 years ago, we started from the scratch. Means we hired some technicians, engineers, helpers in Jordanian staff. It was really important to recruit local people. And during the first 3 years, we had intensive trainings and cooperation with mother companies, mainly Suez, in order to build a competency locally in Jordan. So now I can say after 14 years, competency is quite strong. And just to give you an example, from time to time, we send some experts, Jordanian experts abroad to give support to the mother company. We shifted a little bit, so it is, I believe, quite important. So first, we needed to build this competency, and we needed also to take into account, I would say, a certain level of hazards and risk in the plant, because we have biogas. When we say biogas, means a risk of explosion. But if it's well controlled, people are well trained, there is no, until now we didn't have any big incident. And as usual, for sure, in a wastewater treatment plant, you have a risk of H2S or intoxication, confined space. So this needed to be taken into account, in addition to the expertise in digestion and biogas gensets. And to keep this high level of competency and continuous improvement, we, I would say, implemented, we forced ourselves, but it's not big issues, it was a pleasure to do it, to implement ISO certifications, like ISO 9001, which is quite known, but also which is maybe less common, certification on energy, which is 50001, and the latest one is in certification asset management. So finally, last point to be worth mentioning is that this kind of project for sure is not applicable for small size of plants. It requires usually big investment, and for sure, if you want to have a return of investment on your investment, high capex initially, you need to have a minimum of size of this kind of plant and project. Thank you.
Just a quick question. You said you were able to cover 80% of your electric demand with hydroelectric power generation and the biogas. Have you ever considered solar power for the remaining 20%? Is it a challenge to generate solar power in the area? Just a
it's a good question, because in fact now our target is to be sufficient in energy. So we have different ways to do it. Our mind, because around the station, I don't know if you saw it in the movie, all around, in fact, we have a big space. So there is currently a study to install PV systems. But at the same time, so this is a possibility, especially in Jordan, there is a boom in a PV. And the financial conditions are quite interesting. But also you need to, because you know it's, I would say, net metering. So it means sometimes during the day for sure you produce a lot, and at night it's not possible. So it means that sometimes you have a difference between what you produce and what you need. So you can have an excess, in fact, of energy, so you need to send it to the network. So it is what we call net metering, and sometimes when you need energy, you take it from the network, but I would say annually, the balance is zero, should be zero. It is so the way we can, I would say, contract with the grid. But this is quite complex to obtain this authorization, especially because of this boom. But this is a possibility. Another possibility we are working on is to recover energy from the gas exhaust of the generators. Today, so we use engines. Fuel is biogas, and you have exhaust, and this goes to the atmosphere, and you have high temperature, in fact. We could recover energy from this. And after, we have also other ideas to optimize the water line, which is a big, I would say, consumption in the plant. So I would say, maybe I'm a little bit optimistic, but I would say within 3 or 4 years, we should be able to to be self-sufficient, which will be also premier.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I have a question concerning the water diplomacy. And in order to understand how this is organized, I mean, under which umbrella are those discussions taking place?
In the ministry, they talk about regional water. They have, with Israel, joint water committees, one with Israel and Jordan, other one with Palestine and Israel. With the Unity Dam, what we have with Syria, actually, it is not agreement. It is investment agreement to build the Al-Wahda Dam of the Unity Dam. Actually, it is not a shared water. And they meet twice a year and they discuss water budget. But what is written in the peace treaty is not implemented, because the role of this committee, they should look for new resources of water. They should look for a new win-win project. It is not only meet twice a year and agree on what quantity of water. We at the regional level, we had this, where I am member in initiative, we call it a Blue Peace initiative, where we believe in why not to use the water as a tool for building the peace. Because if you look at the peace treaty with Israel, the only one that is very actively working is Annex 2, which talks about water. If we sit and use this water to build peace rather than conflict, would be the solution. With this initiative, it was a thing of an idea from Indian thinker, and he said everywhere in the world, when they have a shared water, they sit together and they have a commission where they write the vision and the allocation, and they manage the water jointly. And we visited many cases like this. In Europe, we visited the Rhine River Commission. In Asia, we visit Cambodia, Mekong River Commission. Also in Senegal, even the Nile River Basin, we've been there and see how they're doing. In the Middle East, this is the thing that lacking, and we think this should be the solution. With this, we started because of we are now 5 countries, 4 and Turkey. Well, Israel and Palestine is not there because Syria and Lebanon are members, and still they don't sign agreement, peace agreement with Israel, so they cannot sit. Based on that, His Royal Highness Prince Hassan interfered and said, why not to start thinking of circle of cooperation? So we have one circle, it is Iraq, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Turkey. The other circle is Palestine, Israel, and Jordan. And Jordan in between, we can exchange knowledge. And until we have the peace, this circle will be big and big. But from our experience, we keep on meeting and talk, and people who are members are parliament people, MPs in the parliament, because we believe it is the people they want. So who represent the people are the MPs. For these are presented in each country. But again, we have now we are, let's say, started in 2009, still working because of what happens in Arab Springs. We decided Syria should be freeze because we don't know who will be there. So now Syria, they are freeze, but not part of the members. But again, the last stage we said, if we don't have this commission, and the commission should be very powerful, let's say maybe the leaders of each country, because it is important, the decision that will be taken, the people are the members should have the power to decide on behalf of their country. In the last stage now, we will concentrate, we should have a commission. It shouldn't be full commission. Even in Europe, it took like 6 years. But you can start with things that will build trust, let's say, between the countries that are members. You can start with, let's say, calibration of data. You can start with any win-win regional project. And at least if you sit together and start talk, this will do something with this. When we did, I was one of the consultants who prepared the Jordan River development plan. It was done by EcoPeace, and one of the recommendation was, and rather than having this two joint committee, and it is very weak with the Palestinian actually. With Jordan, at least they meet twice a year, and the Red to Dead, which is the phase 1, they call it. It is a water swap to compensate Israel with the water that they are selling to Jordan. But at least they sit together and they feel they are equal party. But why not to have this to start at the Jordan River, to have a commission there where we have the 3, not 2. We sit together and start think of a mutual benefit, start think of the benefit of using water rather than I need this amount of water and that amount of water. This, I think, if you start with this, will help, especially in the Middle East. We suffer from a very scarce of water, so we have to manage, or we have to use this water. In Syria, they waste water, but I don't know where, maybe in Egypt also, it's free of charge. Even in Turkey now, the per capita is almost 1,600, and they are almost near the poverty line. Although when we look at Turkey, we see it's a lot of water there. But in the Middle East, if we don't manage this water very efficiently, we will lose it. And without water, nobody can live here.
May I add a comment? Because you said in your presentation that the scientists are not present. And why not then going for a kind of organization, research center about water, bringing the countries all together in a scientific way, in a research facility?
The problem of regional water, it has political background. So the government usually here in Jordan, I'm talking in Jordan, the government, they do their work without consulting, very rare, with the universities. Although in Europe and everywhere, they use the expertise and the scientists in their universities to do the studies. Here, they're not even the NGOs. We need also to work even with the restructuring of the water, the public sector. The minister, he decide, and they don't do that participatory approach, although it is very important to get the buy-in, even with the PPP or privatization program. It was a very good story. It's a Samra, DC, very, very good one. But because we didn't consult with the public, they now link the privatization with corruption because they don't know. So what we lack is the awareness. So we should, even with the peace, why not to go to the people and start talking about this? Usually this thing with political background or the government, they decide alone and they don't consult with the public.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you very much. I have a couple of issues. The first is you're talking about mining groundwater resources for some time. My question is how long you will keep mining, and what is there a plan when this water is depleted? What to do? The second point is that agriculture uses now probably 50% or 55% of the water resources of Jordan. And it's been continuously water diverted from agriculture to other priority sectors. Now, it is only natural under this condition that agriculture is reformed and that some kind of cropping patterns being introduced to cope with decreasing water for agriculture. You know, I think in 25, 30 years, only treated sewage water will be available for agriculture. So is there a plan for that? I mean, you know, you're investing and talking about the 50% that goes to domestic use and others, but the other 50% is being used probably not to the efficiency that would be expected in such a situation of Jordan. Would you comment on that, please?
Yes, thank you for the question. The plan for groundwater, curtailing groundwater abstraction have been on for years. But it's been the most difficult subject to actually address because of the issues of rights and its economic rights as well. It's not only its right to drink, it's also some people are living off their farms and so on. So the history goes back for many, many years. And it has been the push and pull issue with streaks of enforcement 100% of the way, because the rules are there, the regulations are there. Abstraction is limited to the ones with licenses and so on and so forth. And no new licenses have been given for the last, in my days at least, we gave 2 licenses in 6 years. That was 93, 2000. At least in 20 years, 25 years, no new licenses were given. So it's curtailing itself by itself in a way, because ownership of the well and the land 23 years ago was 1 or 2, now it's 20. So that's a problem. And that's doing it. But as far as the plan is concerned, the laws are there, regulations are there. Now we've even educated the judges and the lawyers in what should be done legally in each particular case of not following the rules. But in the master plan, and specifically in how much water should be used in agriculture, when we look at the future, you see a figure and it stops at that figure, no more. No more. So that's how it is being done. And also the quantity of water that's being reused is increasing. It's the question of the geographic location of where that's happening. Because we treat it at Samra, treat fantastic to very good quality, let's say, because the contractor is here, we say very good quality, not fantastic quality. And it goes into the farming systems in the valley. So we are replacing, and if you use X, half X goes to waste, and in other words, half of your water already is covered by reuse. So I think the plan is happening. And we're facing it. Locally, we're facing. We cannot get good local oranges anymore. And because the quality of the water is not, only a small portion of the Jordan Valley actually has decent oranges. That's up near the Jordan River. The rest doesn't have good oranges. So we're seeing all of this. But we're also seeing the increase in efficiency in farming, the production is much better, and so on and so forth. So the balance is there, but the issue is groundwater, and groundwater is being dealt with.
With the groundwater, we know this, and the plan was before receiving the Syrians. It was not in our strategy at that time. When we have the DC, we'll have extra water, but we will not provide people with more than they receive. The plan was with the amount that we will give, let's say, where they use the groundwater that is going to be depleted, we will stop pumping at that aquifer, and we give them water from the DC until these aquifers replenished. But by having the Syrians now, and when I see the news, they helping the Syrian by digging more wells, this is not good, but what shall they do? Yani they have to provide water with the Syria. But the idea with the new thing, the desalinated with water, even with the red to dead, the plan is to replace this water and stop pumping until it reach its the safe yield, and then be back yani healthy again. With agriculture, we managed to reduce it from like around 79, it's something 50 and something. If you look at our strategy, we divided, you have to distinguish between two types of agriculture. In the Jordan Valley, the most feasible way of using the treated water is to retain it back to the Jordan Valley. Like he said, the infrastructure is there. So with time, most of the water, or 100% of the water, will be treated water. While in the highland, where they use groundwater and they use fresh water, the plan was at that time that they should stop doing agriculture and convert. Even we try with them when we have the Highland Water Forum to try other income generating projects, because we don't want those people to come to Amman and ask for social security. We need to find them job other than agriculture. We think of green water, green electricity, and in Mafraq area, even we tried at that time to establish a fund for those people who will benefit, and the criteria is those who use more water, they are more eligible for this fund to use green electricity or any other tourism, let's say desert tourism, anything other than water. But with the Jordan Valley, it will be there and it will grow, because it's more feasible to have the water go back there, and we will have, this is the basket of food actually for Jordan, and not all the water that is used for agriculture again is good for, it's drinkable. So when you talk about 50%, let's say, I think 40% of it right now, it is treated water. The other is very raw water. So you have to treat it again, to spend money and to transport this water to people to drink. It is not feasible to use it. But now we have the Syrians, and we have, even I read yesterday, they will give some of the DC water, which is very expensive water. It costs us more 1 JD to produce 1 meter of water. Unfortunately, they will send some to the refugees camp to give them water to solve their problem in summertime.
The usual introduction, Jordan is one of the most water scarce countries in the world. Sometimes they rank as 4, sometimes they rank as 3, but we haven't changed. We're still the same. We're still 4 or 3. Annual precipitation varies between 50 millimeters in the desert and 600 millimeters in the Northwest Highlands. The per capita water availability is very low, 140 cubic meters per year, which is less than 10% of the internationally recognized figure for water poverty line. The population in Jordan has increased by 36% in the last 15 years, with additional estimated 1.3 million Syrian refugees. Look at the details here. The number of refugees, total refugees is 1.3 million, nearly. 13% out of the total population. And the refugees in the host community, 89% of the total number. And the refugees in camps is 11%. So out of the 100% number of refugees, 89% live with host communities. They take the share of water like everybody else of 140 cubic meters per year, whereas the refugees, they take something like 30 liters a day. Anyway, the municipal water deficit has increased by 410% in the last 15 years. The estimated water deficit in Jordan for domestic use is estimated to exceed 300 million cubic meters in 2015 and 600 million cubic meters in 2035. Jordan's renewable natural water resources are estimated to be in the range of 800 to 850 million cubic meters per year for all uses. There are also considered sustainable groundwater abstractions from wells and springs beyond the safe field. It's 180%. It's not there. Huh? The actual groundwater abstraction reaches presently approximately, why are the figures, I think it's a different color, huh? 180% of the safe yield. That I know. Because a different color is not shown on Anyway, the initial challenges of the Dead Sea is the decline of the Dead Sea. To the extreme left is the way it was in 1940. Then the middle is the year 2000, and on the right it's expected 2050. Where the surface area is shrinking, of course it's shrinking faster as surface area gets smaller. The sinkhole formations somewhere along the coast or even across the highway, even you can see some sinkholes that had taken place because of the change in the moisture content. The decline is something like 80-something centimeters a year. Of course, it increases every year as the surface area gets smaller. The solution is seen as the Red Sea to the Dead Sea Water Conveyance Project. Now, the key objectives of the project, first of all, is established a secure, affordable water supply for Jordan and the region. Save the Dead Sea from environmental degradation is also a major objective. To build a symbol of peace and cooperation in the Middle East is another one, and I would split that to number 4. Says doesn't facilitate it, it leads to public-private partnership BOT schemes. So the objectives are basically, through the years the project was presented to donors and to the international community. It was presented sometimes as a water project. It was the first time it was introduced as a water project. It was shut down immediately. We couldn't move further with it. Nobody would even negotiate or discuss. Then we found that it's an environmental project in as much as it is a water supply project. So that found ears. And through the years, we moved somewhere and we got to where we got now. But there are two big issues outstanding that remain outstanding at the end of the study program. When they finished the study, they discovered that the overcost is about $10 billion for infrastructure that sits almost exclusively in Jordan, and this money is just simply not available. And the second issue that remained is the consequences of mixing Red Sea and Dead Sea waters at more than 400 million cubic meters a year, which would have been disposed into the Dead Sea, and especially of brine, not only mixing, but also of brine if you do any desalination. So you have two different issues. You have to mix, first of all, the money is an issue. Second of all, when the water is being mixed, it either comes as seawater, or it comes as brine, or it comes as a mixed brine and seawater. The results of this kind of mixture is not really known. But overcoming the challenges, the World Bank studies the beneficiary parties agreed first the rapid initiation of the Red Sea to Dead Sea project during the first phase and call it a pilot phase, by initiating the infrastructure elements of all subsequent project phases. What that means is that if there is an intake for 1.2 billion cubic meters, the intake will still be constructed for 1.2 million cubic meters. If there is a plan, if the pipe is going to carry so many cubic meters of brine into the Dead Sea, it remains as such, but the subcomponents change. You get smaller desalination plants for your need. You get less number of pipes for carrying your water. Anyway, so the phase one was conceived based also on a water swap deal between Jordan and Israel. Israel needs water in the south, where the desalination is likely to take place or can take place, whereas Jordan needs water in the north, where Israel has it available now that they almost desalinate all their needs. So this swap concept is there, and also a swap between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But if Israel provides water to the Palestinians as well. So as a result, a memorandum of understanding was signed in December 2013, where all parties agreed to start phase one. As a follow-up to this memorandum of understanding, a bilateral agreement between Jordan and Israel was signed on February 26, 2015 at the Dead Sea here in Jordan, and agreed on the components and capacities of the first phase. Like how many cubic meters will be transferred, how many cubic meters will be desalinated, and so on and so on. They agreed on the swap concept. We give you so many, you give us so many, on what principles, on financial principles for that. And the modalities of the project administration, how this whole project is going to be handled by all sides, and the responsibilities of the different committees that will be set up to do that. So this answers one of the objectives there of having cooperation and symbolic projects. With all of this, parallel to that, an MOU between Israel and Palestinians is under preparation, and it's been under preparation since 2013. There are the key phase one project components. I can't. This one I cannot see, but anyway, you have we start with the. This one here is this is the Red Sea. That's the zero station where there's a intake pump station, and it goes up in elevation to this level, and then the drop starts all the way nearly to the Dead Sea. Now, what do we have along the way? We have relief reservoirs, because when you pressure the water and you put it somewhere and then you start dropping it, you have to put it in a relief reservoir. You have pumping stations on the way, and on the downside here where the water is going down, there are 2 to 3 power stations, hydraulic power stations. 3 to 4, sorry. And the reason they're 3 to 4, it's not the choice of 3 to 4 because it's a project now. It's the choice, the request is for 3, but if you can get the same energy required of 31 megawatts with 4, you can do it with 4. So it may be easier to do it with 4. So that's left as an option to the contractors. And the distance is 200 somewhat kilometers. If we look at this, this is a better description of the components there. The intention is to bring the intake to construct the intake for 700 million cubic meters, but not to use the 700 million cubic meters. The future 700 million cubic meters of intake can be used instead of going back and redoing. And intakes are not easy to build, but when you build one, you might as well make it as big as you want it for the future. So this will be built for the future. And the number of pipes that carry this water is 2 for 2.2 kilometers, another 2 of 2.5 meter diameter, another 20 kilometers, and then you get to the desalination station 40 kilometers away. At the desalination station, some of the water goes in which is 130, 150 million cubic meters go in. 65 go out as desalinated water, and the balance joins the pipe that's carrying the seawater and takes it all the way to the pressure, to the relief reservoir on top of the hill before it starts its drop towards the Dead Sea. So you have an intake, you have pipe conveying system that carries seawater. Part of it goes to the desalination plant, the other part continues onwards. The brine that leaves the desalination plants joins the onwards and then keeps going and then drops down with 3 power stations, hydraulic power stations, to take advantage of the difference in elevation. Now, if you look at it schematically in the future, there is another another desalination plant planned here, which is intended to also to be taken up and down to Amman. That's a future thing. But this is not part of the current contract that's being tendered, and the Aqaba supply, which is the remainder of the cubic meters that leave the desalination plant, because Israel only takes 30 and the rest goes to, or takes 50, whatever, the rest goes to Aqaba, but that's not included in this contract, but it's included in this phase, because this is something that's doable for Jordan alone. And this is how we look at it in another way of what each component carries with it. And I cannot see the screen here, I cannot see the screen there. Neither the glasses will not help in this situation. I'm in between short sight and long sight. So maybe you can see what's there probably. Yeah? But this is the project schematic, which talks about every component and what you get from every component. Let me see if I can get closer. All right. Thank you. Now I can read my phone now, see. Maysoon's phone. The first section of the Red Sea is an intake structure of 700 million cubic meters. The second green square, there's a 700 million cubic meters there's a pump station to move this 700 million cubic meters forward. There is a boundary which is called Isla boundary because of the geographic location outside the water. It enters into a seawater collection reservoir of 525 million cubic meters. Then it goes to a brine reservoir, which joins the brine reservoir, because the one in blue up is the desalination plant, 65 million cubic meters a year, which were the store 50 million cubic meters, and the other 15 million cubic meters in theory go to Aqaba. And then there's the brine reservoir, as I said, from which you go to another pumping station to pump the rest of the water up to the highland, to the regulating reservoir, before it goes down to the power stations, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it discharges delivers to the sea 350 million cubic meters in the last point. So this is the green squares that we've gone through. Up, the desalination plants are in blue, and the red is the choice that's not included in this project, but that's the Jordanian component of the 65 million cubic meters. Thank you very much. That helped. Yeah. No, I was thanking Maysoon for giving me the phone to read this. But now we still have to talk. We talk a little more about the project. The power. The power provided, there is a certain amount of electricity that's needed. The Jordan Electricity Company has indicated that the power needed is available. Jordan is applying what's called the wheeling regulation in order to do this. So they generate electricity, and they have it on record at the electricity company as so many JDs are allocated to the water authority or to the Ministry of Water and Irrigation, and the rest they pay for the rest. So if you look at the formula here the intake pump station, what does it need? It needs at the intake pump station 17 megawatts. Then at the booster pumping station needs another 25, that's 21. So subtotal of 38. The power generation that can be generated with the 3 or 4 power plants is 31. And so the desalination plants need 27 to 33. So the overall phase 1 project needs 34 to 40 net of electricity, megawatts. Okay. Now there are ways, there's the solar IPP, also independent power plant. There's a solar IPP that could be used also, that can be constructed as well in order to generate this wheeling regulation, to support the wheeling regulation, and it's applied for. There is also a brine study considering the pressure, what's called the pressure retarded osmosis as a future renewable source. Is anybody in desalination here? Anybody in desalination? Yeah. Have you heard of the pressure of this system, of this process? Where the brine gets held back into the pores of the membrane to cause a salient gradient between the fresh and the salt. Yeah, but it's not very common, is it?
It's not common yet.
No.
It's only on the research.
It's on research. So I would wonder if research gets into BOT projects, because BOT projects like known technologies. They don't like research components. Anyway, but that's the idea behind it. 1 minute, one slide. The milestones, where we are. You don't want to know what the project is. In June 2016, the pre-qualifications were received. You have different consortium. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 consortium members. 5 consortia. 51 candidates, 21 candidates within these 5 consortia. Member countries of origin is China, France, Singapore, Italy, Korea, and Japan. For the EPC's country of origin, you have China, France, Canada, Singapore, Italy, Israel, Korea, and Spain. In May 2017, now the final RFP documents are done, and the government of Jordan has already allocated the land, secured the tax exemption, secured the funding from EIB for 3 additional studies, have an MOU with NEPCO, the electricity company, securing the power, secured the commitment from the Arab Potash company for funding of an international research center, engaged with the World Bank for coverage under World Bank Guarantee Program, and also engaged with the EIB and POPARCO, securing their interest in providing finance to the candidates. So the government of Jordan has done its share. All I have to do is tender. There's a public opening of the bids. Evaluation will be done. Only the bidders which pass the technical evaluation will be looked at in terms of price. There will be a pass-fail for the technical, and the price, the successful bidder will be announced openly. Two meetings were held with the donors, one in Aqaba, one in Jordan. So the milestones, the timeline is to issue the RFP documents for the bidders in May this month, the bidders conference and site visit in June, the questions submission deadline September 2017, submission date November, announcement of the successful bidder February 2018, effective date, which is after financial close and approval of preliminary design, will be 15th of November 2018. Thank you very much.